Hi everyone. I'm Rithuli Orleyn from South Africa. I'm part of a movement of activists in Soweto. We come from a tradition here in South Africa known as the Black consciousness tradition and Pan-Africanist way of thought. We're really a youth-based movement that organizes around issues of race and racism. At this particular time of the pandemic, we had some talks. We were invited to come to this program and to kind of give a perspective of what is happening during this COVID-19 pandemic. And I would like to use some of the questions that were given to me and not totally stick to them, but restructure them, find continuities and certain discontinuities, and kind of enter into that narrative, into a narrative that I feel is silenced in the country. And this is really about the Black condition in South Africa. And that's the condition against the crisis that we are faced with. A very useful sort of questions I'd like to go to immediately is what sort of divisions that are formed by racism, coloniality, and apartheid. What sort of divisions do we see re-emerge now or being reproduced? And also, what sort of solidarities do we see emerge now? And against the state interventions, which are always limited, what are sort of people who are in the margins, people in the informal sectors, people who survive on self-reliance and self-subsistence, how are they responding to that? And I'd like to say a lot of what I see happening in the country truly is indeed a picture. We're given a picture of how we've not totally broken away fundamentally with our past of racism, the historical injustices, because most people who live in the townships, in the ghettos, are really having it hard, because some of them would subsist on the informal sector. I mean, it's quite prevalent in the country that people would start a business, they sell vegetables, fruits, and raise a stall next to a mall or a shopping center and sell things, and take that money, go home, buy food, have supper with their children. But now that sort of activity has been banned, really, and I think it was banned without much consideration for those people. So the expectation from the government really is that people must queue up to go to the formal sector, the retailers, the established retailers, and people who would, if you like, in that food security value chain, would bring the tomatoes, potatoes, vegetables, the meat, are not allowed to go buy and sell those things, and they themselves cannot buy from, because what happens in the informal sector is that people can be able to stretch their rent, their meager wages, and this is a burden added to the fact that a lot of people in the townships, in the ghettos, if you like, subsist on not so much formal employment. They have part-time jobs. Their income conditions are very precarious. They may not know if tomorrow they still have the job. It's people who are come to who doing domestic work, and at this time we know those jobs are not they're not jobs that you can trust, that the person, you must trust the good-heartedness of the person, that they would keep giving you money even though you're not coming to work, and there's little that can be done to correct that. So some of those things have been overlooked by the government, and for me they spell out quite precisely how we still live in a setup that continues to advantage, those who are, if you like, in the kind of formal. Right, in privileging the other narrative, the silenced narrative I earlier alluded to, specifically now on how, in this context of the pandemic, where we can see that people continue, those who are historically disadvantaged continue to be disadvantaged. What sort of solidarities now emerge, and how are people responding to limitations of the state's intervention at this moment. There's something I'd like to leave from that I find quite curious, and I think it's a kind of an ethos of Ubuntu that is just prevalent in how we do, how we act, and really the takeaway point there is that even though we have heard for hundreds of years this colonial order that suppresses how we express ourselves as a people, that suppresses our true personality, there are still, principles, a network of meanings that, though they've been destroyed for a long time, they are not totally vanished. And at times like these, they come up and they really kind of hold the people together. We have a couple of aphorisms, proverbs, wise phrasings we can lead from, which inform how people come to form these solidarities, these bonds of dependability and reliability at a time like this. One would be ivilia chikachika, which really means the wheel of life turns and turns. One time it gives you good, sometimes it gives you bad. And so the principle there is that we don't have this template of helper, helped, kind of boss, subordinate, someone who stands aloof in some philanthropist position, who looks down at someone who is beneath, who needs the help. We have this sort of almost egalitarian attitude towards being helped. So the person who's helping, actually this attitude of this egalitarian attitude makes the person who is being helped not to feel the shame when they're being helped. I remember sometime a white psychologist, I must say, was quite taken aback by the notion that in the communities you would send a child next door to ask for sugar or buy salt, and she configured it in the way that she knows best and said that kind of shames the child. And I couldn't believe it. Like, how does that shame the child? That's how we grew up. That's how we know to help one another and allow ourselves to be assisted when we are in times. So there is this sort of another way we impart meaning in how we do things, and at these times, whatever has been suppressing it kind of can't quite suppress it all the way. And there's another activist in India, Arundhati Roy. She also provides a very useful tool to think about these times when she says we must think of this pandemic as a kind of a portal which kind of transports us from our coordinates of reality into another reality. And my contribution here will be that a reality that we can co-create. One of the things that have come through very strongly at this time is that most solutions, even by governments, countries, have turned their back on your market-driven logic. So clearly, I'm not necessarily advocating for socialism here, but clearly capitalism and market driven logic and bottom line motives are not the way to go. But there's another, like I said, there's another narrative of of equality and inequality, disparities, especially when it comes to, say, hospital resources, that I'd like to say something about, my sense is that in this country, first of all, it's almost as if this disease, this virus, this pandemic is single-handedly putting to question a lot of what we have come to know. Currently now we know that the severity of the disease is such that 80% of the people who are infected, for those people it might be mild, 20%, some people may have to be hospitalized, but 5% would be quite critical and they would need critical response at hospitals. But the picture we have in the country is that there's no more than 7,000 critical care beds, and most of those are in the private sector. And we've tested how many people? I think we've tested about, to date, about 147,000 people. Imagine if we were to up that by 40 times as much and maybe reach about 6 million people. At the rate, and we're sitting at the rate, I know this is a snapshot and it may change, but we're sitting at a rate of those people who are tested, 1 of the 30 who are tested is infected. Of course, a third of the people are recovering, but that's also not the big story that we are told. But if we up our testing by 40 times now and increase it from 150, more or less, 1,000 to 6 million, and at this rate, we would need all the beds in the country, all 7,000 of them, would need to, use them for, these coronavirus cases. And clearly, the country doesn't have that capacity. It doesn't have that capacity. So hence I'm saying it forces us to kind of come to new meanings, create new meanings, to ask difficult questions again about what sort of lives have we been invested in, what sort of living has been generating things that we are invested in, like meaning. So now we have this picture of South Africa where we can almost be sure that if effort is done and more people are tested, and with a snapshot sort of rate of infections that we have at this time, we know for sure that, and a lot of South Africans, black people, don't have medical aid. They will not be prioritized to go to private hospitals that have these critical care beds that, as I've already said, they are in the upward estimation of 7,000, 8,000, and there's nothing more. So if millions of people start contracting this thing, it's very likely that they won't be getting the proper help. Just the resources of South Africa are created. Let me say they're inherited as they used to be, and this is not new in South Africa. The Eskom, our national supplier of power, is such that it was created with white people in mind, I'm sorry to say. And when 1994 happened to us, we just inherited the thing as it is. 10 years down the line, there were indicators that, look, this thing is not going to carry us. 26 years down the line, we woke up. Well, there isn't much that we've done, but the point here is that these divisions of coloniality, of race, of apartheid, they have lived throughout what we call a democratic dispensation. So truly, if you think now about optimal testing, and I don't believe much optimal testing has been done, though there is a strategy by the government to go to what they call targeted places where they think the contagion may be increasing, the spread of the virus may be threatening lives, where they do free testing. So there is some kind of free testing. There's a sense from the government to kind of say to people who are doing something. There's lots of media briefings that we are hearing. Just the other day, maybe yesterday, one media briefing was about a survey lockdown, and there was, of course, there are metrics there about how people ask certain questions about how do you feel about the soldiers being around, are you happy with them, and the whole survey is broken down into people who don't without employment and that sort of thing. So optimal testing, what I would say about optimal testing is that unfortunately I don't think it's desirable at all, because if we were to optimally test, we would actually get the true picture of how South Africa is unable to respond to its own people, and it would go back to ideas about, and really these are ideas that impinge the sacred thing about the state, the legitimacy of the state. And so the state really, with all these masks, is really covering its own, it's like a fig leaf, it's covering its own shame, and I know it's not a good way to reflect about one's country, but in trying to be quite honest about how I see the picture, especially when we have to ask the question, centering racism as the bigger problem in this crisis, as the underlying catastrophe for us Black people, in this crisis. So I really don't think that there would be an interest to do optimal testing, because that picture might just become very clear for a lot of people. And you know what, people, when they know that there's nothing you can do and you don't have a legitimacy, the authority, what will happen? People will start rebelling, will start taking things into their own hands. And we've seen this picture with the apartheid. That's how it came down. That's how it came down crashing, is that people begin to realize that, look, this government has no interest in us. It prioritizes white people. We are, it's almost like there's a mother with two children. One is legitimate, official, cared for, well-fed, and then the other is a zombie of liminal places, of liminal spaces, someone who is a pariah. So when optimal testing would happen, in a situation where optimal testing would happen, people might see that picture and might begin to take things into their own hands. So what does the government do really with this surveys? My opinion is that it's really trying to have a buy-in of people's goodwill. Like we've seen, there's a package that is meant to respond to people's needs. People are getting 350 rands now per month, which I really feel is to pacify people, to say to them, look, maybe we can't give you where things to get worse, where you have to be hospitalized, which I doubt, that the capacity of hospitals can take the millions of Black people in this country who don't have money. But when something really bad to happen to you, at least the government has bought your goodwill, that you don't want to go against it. At least you're getting 350 rands a month. Worse still, you are preoccupied with trying to get your documents in order to get this 350 rands, a month. So I think there's really something sinister in how the government knows that it inherited, the people in power know, in office know, that they inherited a system that was created with no Black person in mind, not in our millions, but they've inherited as it is, and because they are elite few up there in the top, they're happy, with it, and they have no vision to create, a way forward, another way, a way that can accommodate Black people who are in their millions this country. So really then, the question falls on us that in this time, what sort of difficult questions, this context of an epidemic, a pandemic rising up, what sort of questions, difficult questions do we ask about our own existence? Right, the intention really is not to paint a grim picture. Really, the intention is to be as honest as one can be in a conversation, a very difficult conversation at these difficult times. And so one also wishes to say there are other unintended consequences that have come out of this pandemic situation. Like we've seen a drop in the emergency wards. I mean, doctors used to battle with a lot of intake in the emergency ward, but now that there's been a ban in alcohol, ban in driving around, so there's more space created in the wards now, and doctors are not so inundated with a lot of people who are who are in critical condition. So one unintended consequence. There's also been statistics thrown around about a 72% drop in the murder rate. I don't know, maybe that should be qualified with the reported murder rate. I don't know. Another one is that there's been an 87% drop in reported rape. We know this country is very synonymous with rape and all sorts of bad things, really. So, and this again for me speaks to that wound of coloniality, how we find a way to make sense of our fatal ways of being alive as Black people. So we easily end each other's lives, we easily inflict each other pain, but for some reason, because we are now, our movements are locked down, so many things cannot happen as normal, and so we see these unintended really consequences of drop in this. I mean, people will be driving in the past weeks, Easter weekends, and they would be committing accidents on the road. But now we've seen, I don't know if there are numbers put out about that, but a large drop from about 800 last year who died on the road to about 20 or 2 who died this year because of the so there is that also side of the picture. Like I say, my intention is not to paint a very grim. To go back a little bit to some of the things I've mentioned about there being a survey, there was a useful question that came out about how people are interacting with soldiers, and I think the study brought out something that said 74% people of 19,000 who were surveyed. I don't know how they were surveyed, because that's also quite important at this time during the lockdown, was if you survey people, especially Black people, online, I mean, a lot of people don't have access to go online, so you're really taking a sample from, a very skewed kind of sample. But those 19,330 people who were surveyed, their response to their interaction with the police, law enforcement, soldiers, was that 74% said they had no contact, and 14% said they were treated very badly, and 3% said they were treated respectfully. I want to highlight something quite interesting about the psychology of our country, which again I feel strongly is linked directly to our history of injustices. I think we have an avoidance sort of psychology in this country, and it permeates everything. If you take my opinion on it. A question came from that media briefing of the survey, and how the minister responded to it. It was quite interesting. Instead of looking at the picture where people are saying 3% actually were happy with soldiers, he looked at the picture of 74 people who said they had no contact. And I'm thinking, if 3% are happy with soldiers and police out there, you should stick, with that, wrestle with that, find a way to say, look, this cannot be good. Instead, he was quite happy that 74% said they had no contact and 14% said they were treated rudely. So, we have unfortunately a psychology of avoidance. We don't want to win necessarily, we just don't want to lose. And that makes all the difference. It makes all the difference in how we play soccer. It makes all the difference in how we educate our people. It makes all the difference in how we, chart a vision, for the next generation, for the next 20, 100 years. And we're just avoiding those difficult questions. But this time, this this pandemic, this context is forcing us to pause, once more and ask ourselves, those difficult questions. What sort of nation do you want to be? Also, one perhaps last thing is that it's interesting that there's very little activism going on, at the end. It's the time that we need it the most. Clearly, we don't see it from our politicians. They've hidden away. The most loudest of our politicians in the opposition have just, fizzled out into thin air, basically. They are, consolidating as a state now. They hardly say anything about their objectives, their mission, that sort of thing. So it's a time I feel we need activism even more. But there's little of it allowed. It's not seen as an essential service. I mean, we know that there are people in the township, in the rural places, areas where water doesn't reach them, so they can't wash their hands as regularly as is required. But there's no activism to rally people around that and say, look, more than just giving water to people, let's also have a sense of where we are as a people, what we'd like to see in the future. And I'm not one to rush to provide answers and solutions. I would say at a time like this, perhaps one of the best solutions is to pause, distill our thoughts, and really think how do we get out of a problem like this before we rush to provide answers and solutions. I'd like to extend a word of gratitude to the opportunities given by the Fanon Foundation, Professor Maldonado-Torres, to give a perspective of what we're dealing with here in South Africa when we are in a time like this, context of this pandemic. Thank you.